My name is Helen Walters. I'm 59 years old. For most of my life, I've been introduced as Tom's wife. Sometimes Mrs. Walters, rarely Helen. Helen became something people said when they needed something: a napkin, a favor, another cake at the church potluck. I don't think anyone ever paused to ask who Helen really was. And for the longest time, I didn't either. Tom and I met in college, freshman orientation to be exact. He had that kind of easy smile women notice, the kind that makes professors linger a little longer during lectures and waitresses refill his coffee without being asked. He sat next to me during a seminar on 20th century American literature and made a joke about Hemingway's toxic masculinity before that term was fashionable. I laughed, not because it was clever, but because I was nervous and trying to belong. We started dating that fall. He was magnetic, confident, full of ideas. I was quiet, practical, studying education, dreaming of a stable life with a garden and maybe 2 kids. He wanted to travel the world, start his own business, be someone. I didn't know it then, but I would spend the next 3 decades shrinking so he could expand. We got married the summer before senior year, a small ceremony in my parents' backyard. My sister Emily sobbing behind her disposable camera, and my mother wringing her hands about the forecast, which, like our future, was unpredictable but full of sunshine for the moment. I wore a second-hand lace dress that cost us $68. He wore a navy suit and grinned like he'd just won a prize. We moved into a small apartment above a bookstore where I worked part-time, while Tom tried one business after another. First, it was marketing, then consulting. Eventually, he found his stride in real estate, buying up cheap properties before the market surged. By then, I was pregnant with our first child, Marcus. We had 2 more, Joanna and Lily. And with every baby, I seemed to grow more invisible, more mom, less me. It wasn't tragic, not really. Just quiet. I changed diapers, baked birthday cakes shaped like dinosaurs, volunteered at school fairs. I smiled in Christmas photos. I hosted Thanksgiving for 20 years straight. People would look at our family and say, "Now that's a couple. They've got it figured out." I believed them. Or maybe I needed to believe them. Even when Tom started staying late at the office, even when he took up jogging but never came back sweaty, even when I found a long red hair on his blazer, not mine, not our daughter's, a whisper of another woman, tucked right where his heart should be. I didn't ask. I told myself there were other explanations. Maybe it belonged to a client. Maybe he'd leaned back on a train seat. Maybe. I was always so good at building explanations out of thin air. Tom never hit me. He didn't yell. He bought me gifts on our anniversary, sometimes expensive, always impersonal. He said I was beautiful when I wore mascara. He kissed my cheek in front of company. The kids adored him. So I stayed. I stayed because I thought that was love. Endurance, tradition, looking the other way. When our eldest graduated, I made a scrapbook. His baby photos, his acceptance letter, his college move-in day. Tom barely glanced at it. "Nice work, Helen," he said, reaching for his phone. It struck me then that this man who built a life with me hadn't really seen me in years. Maybe he never had. But I still smiled at parties, still passed hors d'oeuvres, and refilled wine glasses when we had guests. People said, "You're so lucky, Helen," and I would nod and say, "Yes, I am." My voice was always soft, agreeable, a perfect hostess, until, of course, the night when everything changed. But that's not where this story begins. This story begins with a woman who, for 30 years, stitched together a beautiful life from silence, who pressed the creases out of every tablecloth, who learned to speak without words, who bore everything so that no one else would have to. This story begins with me, and the moment I finally decided to stop disappearing. The first real sign came on a Thursday. Not the first incident. Those had come earlier in whispers and shadows. But the first time something pierced the shell I had built so carefully. It was a letter, a pale blue envelope, hand addressed, no return address. I found it tucked among the bills on the kitchen counter. I remember the sound of the water boiling on the stove, the afternoon sun spilling across the tile, the dog barking at something outside. It was such a normal day, ordinary in every way. And then I opened it. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper, cream-colored, thick, expensive. The message was printed in neat serif font, like something from a typewriter. He tells me he loves me too. Maybe one day you'll let him go. Oh, that's all it said. No photos, no lipstick marks, no fingerprints of drama. Just those quiet words. I stood at the sink for a long time, the letter in one hand, a dish towel in the other. I could hear the neighbors' children playing outside. Our dog had curled up near the door, and upstairs, Tom's suitcase was still half packed from his latest trip to Phoenix. My first instinct wasn't anger. It wasn't even fear. It was shame. Shame that someone had seen me, us, from the outside and decided they had a better claim. That someone had found the cracks in my perfect, glossy life and decided to squeeze themselves in. I didn't say a word when Tom got home. He brought flowers, tulips my favorite, but the bouquet had the price sticker still on it, and the stems were already wilting. He kissed my forehead like a man arriving home from war, not an affair. He asked if I'd made lasagna. I said yes. That night, I placed the letter in the back of my nightstand drawer, behind the sewing kit and the bottle of hand lotion I always forget to use. I told myself it was a mistake, a prank, a jealous ex, or some twisted spam. People do strange things. Maybe someone was trying to mess with us. The next sign wasn't subtle. It came 2 weeks later, while Tom was packing for a conference in Seattle. I checked the company calendar online, like I always did when he left town, a habit I'd picked up somewhere in our third decade together, just to know where he was speaking, what hotel to call, whether he'd be gone 2 nights or 3. But there was no conference, no listing, not a single mention of him on the speaker panel, just a blank Thursday. I remember the moment vividly. I was at the dining table, my reading glasses sliding down my nose, my finger hovering over the trackpad of the laptop. There was a plate of untouched toast next to me, a half-drunk cup of tea. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat back in the chair, folded my hands over my stomach, and exhaled. The first crack was no longer a whisper. It was a fracture. That night, I didn't ask him about it. He was too busy pretending to forget his charger, asking if I could wash his conference suit, smoothing the lines in his itinerary with performative stress. I just nodded and handed him his favorite tie, the navy one with the silver flecks. He left on Friday morning, kissed my cheek like always, said, "Don't wait up." And I didn't. Instead, I started packing, not suitcases, not yet. I started packing my mind. I pulled out an old notebook from the laundry room cabinet, the one I used to use for grocery lists and to-do reminders. I started jotting down dates, trips, flowers, missed dinners, phone calls that dropped too quickly, times he didn't answer, excuses that never lined up. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew something was there. I could feel it in my bones, in that dull, low ache women carry when their world starts to tilt. Not a scream, not a lightning bolt, a slow, sinking shift, like the tide pulling you under, 1 inch at a time. In the days that followed, I began to notice more. Perfume, not mine. Lipstick smudges on receipts. His cologne, worn stronger than usual, almost as if trying to hide something, rather than impress anyone. And then the message that broke me open in a way the first one hadn't. A voicemail. I found it while checking missed calls on the house phone, one of those accidental recordings people make when their phone dials without them knowing. Except this wasn't accidental. Not really. The voice was soft, feminine, laughing. You left your tie here again, baby. Next time, I'm keeping it for myself. She said again. I didn't listen to it twice. I just deleted it. Then I turned off the phone, unplugged it from the wall, and walked outside barefoot into the cold evening air. I stood in our garden, the one I had trimmed and mulched every spring for 25 years, and looked at the roses, and for the first time I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just the hollow understanding that I had become a supporting character in a life I had helped build. He thought I didn't know, that I wouldn't dare, that after all these years of nodding and smiling and bringing out hors d'oeuvres, I wouldn't have the spine to see what was happening. But he forgot something important. I see everything. I always have. And I was done playing blind. They say when a woman is quiet, you should worry. But I wasn't just quiet. I was careful. Tom had made one critical error in his little double life. He assumed I was the same Helen I had always been, the one who ironed his shirts without asking, who kept his calendar organized, who smiled at every dinner party and laughed at every joke, who made small talk with his coworkers even when their eyes lingered too long. He didn't notice that I had stopped laughing quite so easily. Or maybe he did, and just didn't care. Either way, that week after the voicemail, I stopped waiting for answers. I started building my own. The first thing I did was check the laptop. Not his, mine, the family one, the one we both used from time to time, where I printed recipes, managed grocery orders, organized photo albums. I'm not a hacker, but I'm not an idiot either. And most men forget the simplest rule of digital secrets. They always leave traces, especially when they think the woman sitting next to them doesn't know what a folder tree is. It was buried 3 levels deep. A folder labeled Q1 Reports, tucked inside another labeled Work Budget, inside a third simply called 2021. Inside were photos, dozens, maybe hundreds, taken with care, taken with arrogance. Hotel rooms, restaurant tables, mirror selfies, her legs in heels, resting on his lap, his face, barely visible, in the reflection of a window, smiles that weren't for me, moments captured with intimacy, shared with pride. And there were screenshots from a messaging app I didn't recognize. One said, "Can't wait for her to fall asleep. I'll sneak out around midnight." Another, "You looked incredible in that red dress last night. The way you wore my ring after." I paused there. My ring. I zoomed in. And there it was, the small sapphire band he gave me for our 20th anniversary, sitting proudly on her middle finger, upside down like a joke. I closed the folder. Then I opened it again. And this time, I began to copy every file, every message, every photo. I started a new folder of my own, on an encrypted drive. I labeled it Garden Inventory in case he ever snooped. Day after day, I gathered more. Receipts from a jewelry store I'd never visited. One for a necklace, gold, delicate, not my taste. Another for a 2-night stay at a coastal inn, billed under his company name, but with a second guest listed by initial, AA, the same as the letter. It was all there, more than evidence. It was a scrapbook of betrayal, documented, dated, archived like a love story that forgot it was written in someone else's house. I didn't cry. Tears belonged to pain. This was something else. This was disassociation. This was analysis. I became a scientist of my own marriage, watching from the outside, cataloging my findings. The most unsettling thing? Tom came home every night as if nothing had changed. He poured wine, asked about the grandkids, rubbed my shoulders while I cooked. He even planned a little weekend trip, just the two of us, to the cabin we hadn't visited in years. Said he missed our quiet mornings, our crossword puzzles on the porch. I smiled and nodded. I even packed a bag. But I left my laptop at home because I knew this wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a performance, a long-running play where I'd forgotten I was still on stage. And now, I had the script. I had the stage directions. I had the props. I was no longer Helen, the loyal wife. I was Helen, the collector. And soon I would become Helen, the storyteller. But first, I needed an audience. 30 years. 3 decades of marriage, 10,000 dinners, 4 moves, 2 children, 5 cars, and 100 arguments no one remembers anymore. Tom decided we had to celebrate it all. Publicly. He said it over morning coffee, holding a slice of toast like a gavel. Let's make it big, Helen, really big. You only get 1/30th anniversary. The irony of that sentence would make me laugh now, but at the time, I nodded and smiled. Sure, Tom, let's make it unforgettable. I watched the light flicker off his glasses as he looked at his phone, probably texting her while telling me about floral arrangements. I stirred my tea and felt the burn of lemon on my tongue. It was all I could do to keep from spitting the bitterness back at him. He planned everything. Of course he did. He loved playing the gracious husband, the man of the house, the successful executive who remembered anniversaries and threw elegant parties in the name of love. People adored that version of Tom. Hell, I had adored him once too. He rented out a grand banquet hall on the edge of town. One of those places with chandeliers like frozen waterfalls and velvet chairs heavy enough to anchor ships. He ordered a custom backdrop for the stage. I saw the proof copy on the printer one afternoon, still warm from the machine. Helen and Tom, 30 years strong. The ampersand looked like a noose. There would be over 80 guests, family, friends, colleagues, people I hadn't seen in a decade. Even Pastor Samuel from our old parish, the man who married us in a small white chapel under the oak trees back when I still believed in sacred vows. Tom wanted a string quartet, a champagne tower, a catered dinner with 3 courses, and white-gloved servers. He asked me to pick the cake. I told him red velvet. It used to be his favorite. Now I hoped it would stain. The children were thrilled. They'd grown up seeing us as a unit, a storybook couple that made it through the storms. My daughter called it inspiring. My son said we were the real deal. I smiled and told them I couldn't wait. But inside, I was watching the final act write itself. Tom asked me to speak. After the cake, he said. Just a few words, nothing big. You know, say something sweet. I said I would, and I meant it. I spent weeks preparing, not a speech, not a toast, a revelation. Every evening when Tom kissed me goodnight, I waited for the soft rhythm of his sleep. Then I opened my laptop and arranged the photos in order. I created a slideshow, polished the transitions, adjusted the lighting so the images would be crisp even on a large screen. I added screenshots, letters, timestamps. I named the file 30 Years of Love. On the night before the event, I had it transferred to a USB, a clean silver one shaped like a key. I tucked it into my handbag beside a tube of lipstick and a ring box. The ring wasn't mine, it was hers. The one from the picture, the sapphire band that had once belonged to me. He'd given it away like it was nothing, just another token in a life of shared lies. The irony is, I didn't want to destroy him. Not at first. I wanted him to feel something real. Fear, shame, regret. Not because I hated him, because for 30 years I had loved him with every quiet part of myself, and he'd squandered that love like spare change in someone else's pocket. But when I looked in the mirror that morning, something changed. I wasn't the wife anymore. I was the author of the ending. I put on the pearl earrings he gave me after my second miscarriage. The ones he said symbolized resilience. I wore them like armor. Then I zipped my dress, tied my hair, and stepped into my heels, and walked into the storm I had created with my own still hands. The banquet hall shimmered in warm light. Crystal glasses sparkled on linen-draped tables. Waiters moved like chess pieces across the floor, placing plates and pouring wine. The string quartet played something elegant in the corner. Vivaldi, maybe. I don't remember. All I remember was the sound of my own breath, slow and even. Tom worked the room like a politician, laughing, hugging, thanking people for coming. His smile was a mask so well worn, even I almost forgot what was underneath. He kissed my cheek 3 times that night. Each time, I resisted the urge to wipe it off. Our daughter gave a sweet speech first. "They showed me what real love looks like," she said, eyes wet and voice trembling. I watched my son raise his glass beside her, proud and unaware. They had no idea. That's the part that nearly undid me. Not Tom, the children, the beautiful, unknowing children who saw two people in love when one of us had been breaking for years. Then came the cake. 3 tiers, red velvet, ivory frosting piped in elegant swirls, H&T written in gold on top. People clapped, someone whistled, and then Tom. He tapped the microphone with 2 fingers. "Testing, testing. Still married," he joked. Laughter, light, easy applause. He thanked the guests, cracked a few inside jokes, told everyone how lucky he was. Then he turned to me with that wide, rehearsed grin. "And now, the woman who made all of this possible, my Helen. Say a few words, sweetheart." I stood. My heels clicked against the polished floor like a countdown. I took the microphone from his hand, cool metal, still warm from his fingers, and stepped into the spotlight. The room hushed. The air went still. All eyes on me. I smiled. "Thank you, Tom," I said. "Thank you for 30 years. A soft murmur of approval moved through the crowd. "I've been working on something," I continued. "Something to show everyone just how deeply you've loved us." I turned toward the screen. The projector buzzed to life. The first image flickered up, a photo of us, early in our marriage. I was 29, in a blue dress, laughing. He was beside me, hand on my waist. The next, our kids, toddlers on a picnic blanket. More applause. Nostalgia was on my side. And then, her. A photo of Tom in a hotel lobby, his arm around a brunette in red heels. The crowd murmured. Another image, a receipt, diamond necklace, room 417, a screenshot of a message. "Can't wait to see you again. You make me feel alive." Gasps. Chairs shifted. Someone dropped a fork. And then more women, more texts, more time-stamped photos, faces in mirrors, beds, selfies, rings. The room was no longer warm. It was frozen. Tom stood up. "Helen, what the hell?" But I didn't hear him. The blood in my ears had drowned everything else. My own voice returned like a bell. "This is your legacy, Tom." I pulled the ring box from my handbag and opened it. The sapphire caught the light. "This was mine," I said. "You gave it to someone else. I kept the receipt." People began whispering. A woman near the front covered her mouth. The pastor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Tom moved toward me. "This isn't the time," he hissed. I stepped back, microphone still in hand. "It's exactly the time." My voice didn't shake, not once. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in decades, I saw a man I didn't owe anything to. I slipped the microphone back into the stand. Then I turned and walked out, not rushed, not sobbing, not theatrical, in silence, through the center aisle, past all those stunned faces, past our friends, his co-workers, my children, the pastor, and out the front doors into the cool evening air. I didn't look back, not once. The night air greeted me like an old friend, crisp, clear, unapologetically real. I walked slowly, heels clicking on the marble stairs of the event hall. My dress caught slightly on the wind, and I let it. For once, I wasn't fixing things. I wasn't smoothing over wrinkles or faces or feelings. Inside, I knew chaos had bloomed. People would be whispering, asking questions, looking at Tom. Someone would be trying to stop the slideshow. Probably our son, panicking, confused, wanting to protect his father. The string quartet had likely gone silent. Waiters frozen mid-step. The cake untouched. I didn't care. I opened the car door, sat down, took off my shoes. My feet ached, but the pain made me feel alive. I placed the ring box, that damned sapphire, on the passenger seat beside me. It stared up like a witness. My phone buzzed. Once, twice, a third time. Tom. Then our daughter. Then our son. I didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, I opened the photo album I had brought with me. The real one. Not digital, not for projection. A heavy leather-bound book with plastic sleeves. My own creation. Printed and assembled in secret at a local shop, one town over. I flipped through it. Each page held evidence. Faces, names, dates. The woman from his work. The neighbor who once brought over lemon pie. The trainer he swore was just helping with his back pain. A hotel loyalty card I found under the bed. A printed copy of a flight itinerary. A trip I wasn't told about. There were 26 names in total. 26. He wasn't unfaithful once. He was unfaithful consistently. And for 30 years, I had been faithful to a lie. The first time I saw the signs, I rationalized. That hair on his jacket? Static. That text message? A misdial? That smell on his shirt? Cologne from a hug. You get good at making excuses when you're afraid of burning everything down. But eventually, you stop fearing the fire. You start fearing the silence. My phone rang again. Tom. I let it go to voicemail this time. Helen, he said, his voice cracking. Helen, please, I don't know what that was. I don't know what you're trying to do. Can we talk? Can we please talk? I stared out the windshield. The parking lot had emptied. Only a few cars remained. I know it looks bad, he continued. But this wasn't the time. You embarrassed the kids. You embarrassed yourself. You didn't have to do it like this. Ah. There it was. Not an apology, not regret, just inconvenience. He wasn't sorry I found out. He was sorry I made it public. I pressed the red button. No more voicemails, no more rewrites of my reality. I drove home, parked outside the house that had once been our dream. The porch lights were still on. Tom had probably arranged it, some timer he'd proudly installed himself. Smart systems, he called them. But the lights didn't feel smart now. They just felt artificial. Inside, I packed, not frantically, deliberately. My suitcase was already half filled from a week ago, when I had first printed the photos and knew, deep down, what I'd do. I added only what mattered: documents, a few clothes, an envelope filled with cash I'd hidden months earlier. I took down one photo from the living room wall, the one from our 10th anniversary in Italy. Not to keep it, just so it wouldn't keep watching me. By midnight, I was gone. I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave a note. I left silence, a silence 30 years in the making. The morning light filtered through the blinds of the small cafe I had wandered into. The sun had already risen, but the world outside was still quiet, as if it hadn't quite caught up to me yet. The hustle of the night before seemed distant, like a bad dream fading into nothing. I took a sip of coffee. It was strong, black and bitter, just how I liked it. My sister, Lily, sat across from me, still wearing her pajama top, the same one she'd slept in during the drive. We hadn't spoken much during the ride to this little cafe on the outskirts of town. There wasn't much to say. She had always been my rock. She knew something was wrong long before I did, even though I had never let on. But last night, when I finally told her, when she saw the photos, she didn't say much. She didn't need to. She understood. She wasn't surprised. "Do you feel better?" Lily asked now, her voice soft but probing. I placed my cup down on the table and smiled at her. Not a forced smile, a real one. "I feel like I just woke up," I said, "like I was sleepwalking through my own life. But now, I'm here. I'm finally here." Lily nodded slowly, her fingers tapping on the edge of her cup. She didn't push. She didn't need to. The weight of 30 years had already been lifted, and I wasn't going to carry it around anymore. In the distance, a man walked past the window, his face buried in his phone. The usual morning rush was picking up. People on their way to work, checking emails, laughing on the phone. The world hadn't stopped. But for me, everything had changed. The night before, the look on Tom's face when I walked out, the silence, the stunned faces, the projector still frozen on those images, his confusion, his desperation. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. He didn't understand why I left, but I understood why I had to go. The newspapers were already buzzing with the aftermath. "The holiday of love ends in shock." That was the headline I saw when I flipped through the local paper. There was a picture of Tom, his face pale, his hand over his eyes like he was hiding. I hadn't been there for the photo op, but there it was, a symbol of his fall. Helen Waters' silent exposé. They'd printed my name. The scandal had already made its rounds. Whispers in the small town, texts flying, the story circulating faster than I could have ever imagined. Tom tried to do damage control, of course. He sent out a statement saying he was shocked and heartbroken by my actions and that things had gotten out of hand. But the truth had already been exposed. The lies were unraveling faster than he could catch them. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers tracing the rim of my coffee cup. "Do you think he's—" Lily began, but I interrupted her before she could finish. "I don't care." The words felt so easy, so simple. "You did what you had to do," she said, giving me a small, reassuring smile. "And I think you've given yourself the freedom to finally live." I nodded. For the first time in 30 years, I wasn't responsible for fixing someone else's mistakes. I wasn't holding someone's broken pieces together with my own hands. I could breathe. It was quiet, the kind of peace that comes after a storm, when the world is still and everything feels like it's in place. I wasn't sure what the future held, where I'd go, what I'd do next, but I didn't need to know. I had spent so many years making choices for everyone else. Now, for the first time in my life, I was making them for me. "I'm going to get a new phone," I said, breaking the silence. "I'm going to change my number. I'm done answering to people who didn't even see me." Lily smiled at me. It was the kind of smile that meant she knew the weight was gone. The burden, the exhaustion, the silent compromises. I wasn't the same woman I had been when I walked out of that hall. I wasn't even the same woman who had spent 30 years pretending. I had been afraid once, afraid of being alone, afraid of breaking everything. But now, alone wasn't so scary. It felt like a blank page. It felt like the beginning of something. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. I walked out of that cafe with my sister. The world outside felt lighter. It was a new day, a new chapter. I didn't need to carry his lies anymore. I didn't need to be the dutiful wife. I didn't need to wear the mask. I was free. For the first time in my life, I was free.